You're listening to The Girl in the Girly Dress Who Loved Drug Dealers, a comedic memoir with business wisdom by me. Chapter 6, From Weed Bags to Workflows, What the Streets Taught Me About Systems. At some point, my feelings stopped being the loudest thing in the room. My observations took over. I started noticing patterns, not just in the men I dated, but in how their world actually worked. And once you see systems, you can't unsee them. This wasn't randomness. This wasn't luck. This wasn't just vibes. It was structure. It started with the little things. The way they always weighed product in the same spot, on the same scale, at the same time of day. The way they answered their phones, some calls immediately, others sent to voicemail, others ignored entirely. There was a hierarchy to communication I didn't understand at first, but eventually recognized as customer management. The way they never ran out, ever, because running out meant lost revenue, lost trust, lost reputation. So they always had backup, always had a supplier, always had a plan B. That wasn't luck. That was inventory management. I remember sitting on the couch one afternoon watching one of them organize his product for the week. He had it all laid out on the coffee table. Bags, scale, product, labels in his head if not on paper. He moved methodically, weighed each portion, bagged it, set it aside, moved to the next one. No music, no distractions, just focus. "Why do you do it like this?" I asked. He looked up, surprised I was paying attention. "What do you mean?" "All at once, the same way every time." He shrugged. "Easier. I know exactly what I got. Know what I can move. Know when I need to re-up. If I do it different every time, I lose track." And there it was. Batch processing, a term I wouldn't learn in business school until years later. But I was watching it happen in real time on a coffee table with weed and sandwich bags. There were routines, times, rules, boundaries. They didn't sell to just anyone. New customers had to be vouched for, had to come through someone trusted, had to prove they weren't cops, weren't snitches, weren't liabilities. That was risk management. And they didn't do business in certain areas. Too hot, too watched, too risky. That was market analysis. They had regular customers, people they'd served for months, sometimes years. People who bought the same amount at the same time like clockwork. That was subscription-based revenue before I knew the term. They raised prices when supply was low and demand was high. They offered deals when they needed to move product quickly. They built loyalty through consistency. Same quality, same weight, same availability. And when someone tried to short them, tried to negotiate unfairly, tried to take advantage, they cut them off immediately. No second chances. That was protecting your business model. I started asking questions, not out loud, but internally. How does money move? Cash. Always cash. No paper trail. No banks. No records. But they still tracked it. Mentally. In notebooks hidden in places I'd never find. They knew what came in, what went out, what was owed, what was profit. Why does stress show up here but not there? Stress showed up when routines broke down. When a supplier was late. When a regular customer disappeared. When someone new started asking too many questions. Stress didn't show up during the actual work, the weighing, the bagging, the transactions, because that part was systematic. What happens when systems fail? Chaos, mistakes, lost money, paranoia, conflict. I watched a deal fall apart once because he'd gotten sloppy, hadn't weighed something properly, hadn't communicated clearly, hadn't followed his own process. And the fallout was immediate. Lost customer, lost money, lost trust. He was furious, not at the customer, but at himself. "I knew better," he said, pacing. "I fucking knew better." That's when I realized the system wasn't optional. It was survival. What happens when they're respected? Peace, flow, predictability, profit. When the system was honored, when he followed his own rules, maintained his routines, stayed disciplined, everything worked. Money came in, customers were happy, risk was managed, life felt manageable, the hustle was still there. But it wasn't chaotic, it was structured hustle. And that's what made it sustainable. People like to pretend street business is sloppy. It's not. Sloppy people don't last. What I saw was precision disguised as casualness. Everything had a place, everything had a rhythm, everything had a consequence if mishandled. And suddenly my brain clicked. Oh, this is a workflow. It made me look at my own life differently. At the time I was in college, working part-time jobs, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I was exhausted, not physically, emotionally. Because I was hustling without systems, I was saying yes to everything, overcommitting, undercharging, double booking myself, burning out. I thought effort meant doing more. But watching these men, I realized effort means doing smart. They didn't work harder than me. They worked more intentionally. They didn't hustle 24/7. They hustled during specific windows, when demand was high, when supply was ready, when opportunity was present. The rest of the time, they rested, strategized, planned. And that balance, that intentional rhythm, was something I'd never seen modeled before. Not in church, not in school, not in the real jobs I'd worked, but here it was, in the most unexpected classroom. Marijuana during this phase became less about escape and more about observation. I'd sit quietly, high, notebook nearby, brain making connections I didn't even realize were business related yet. I wasn't dreaming, I was decoding. I'd replay interactions, study patterns, notice where systems existed and where they broke down. I started applying it to my own life. What if I stopped saying yes to every shift at work and only worked the most profitable ones? What if I stopped overcommitting to social obligations that drained me? What if I treated my time the way they treated their product, valuable, limited, not to be wasted? Slowly, I started experimenting. I set boundaries around my schedule. I stopped answering every call immediately. I started saying no without explanation, and my life got calmer. Not because I was doing less, but because I was doing less randomly. I was creating structure. Here's the business lesson that emerged fully formed. Hustle without systems will always exhaust you. Systems create freedom. I saw how stress only showed up when routines broke down, how chaos followed inconsistency, how peace existed where expectations were clear and respected. And that's when I knew, deep down, that whatever I built one day would need structure, not rigid rules, just intentional flow. I wasn't meant to move fast and loud. I was meant to move calm and consistent. That realization softened something in me. I stopped trying to match anyone's pace, stopped forcing myself into rhythms that didn't fit, stopped believing struggle was proof of dedication. Years later, when I built Winn publications, I didn't realize I was pulling from this era, but I was. The way I manage my time, batched, intentional, boundaried, the way I handle clients, vetted, respected, valued for the right fit, not just any fit, the way I price my services, clear, firm, unapologetic, the way I protect my energy by saying no to anything that disrupts my system, the way I plan for contingencies, always having a backup, never relying on one stream, one supplier, one plan. And that wasn't taught in business school. That was taught at coffee tables, in cars, in apartments in East Oakland, by men who learned to build something sustainable in environments designed to tear them down. I remember one conversation years into this era where I asked one of them directly, "How do you keep it all straight? All the people, the money, the timing?" He looked at me like the answer was obvious. "I don't think about it," he said. "I just do the same shit every time. That way I can't forget." Routine as memory, system as safeguard, consistency as competitive advantage. I wrote it down that night, and not in those words, but the concept, and I've been building from it ever since. Still, love was present, still complicated, still inconsistent in ways that no system could fix. Because here's the thing about systems, they work for business. They don't work for relationships that aren't built on mutual respect. I could observe their discipline all I wanted, could admire their structure, could learn from their workflows, but I couldn't systematize someone into treating me better. I couldn't create a routine that would make them consistent. I couldn't batch process my way into emotional safety. And that realization, slow, painful, undeniable, was the beginning of the end. I was starting to understand something that would later guide my biggest decisions. You can borrow someone's discipline without inheriting their chaos. I could take the lesson without taking the lifestyle. I could appreciate the structure without staying in the structure. I could learn from proximity without becoming permanent. And once I understood that, the end of this era quietly began. Not with drama, not with a final fight or a grand exit, but with clarity. The clarity that I'd learned what I needed to learn, that I'd absorbed what I could absorb, that the classroom had served its purpose. And it was time to build something of my own, not in their world, in mine, with their lessons, but on my terms. And that's exactly what I did. Thank you for listening. If this chapter resonated with you, I'd love to hear how it made you feel. You can share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to support this work, you can pre-order the book using the link in the comments.